Okay, I've already worked this out. I'm going to try to talk you through it. Here is that problem from your book. It's a quadratic equation because it's got a w squared. And then the 2 is called A, the -3 is B, the -64 is C. If you were going to use the quadratic formula, but what you're doing is factoring. There's a lot of ways you can do this, but I like what's something called the AC method. So I'm literally going to take, and I'm showing this in pink, whatever number A is, and I'm going to multiply it times the C, which is -64. So -65. So I take 2 times -65, which is a -130. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the factors of 130. So 1 times 130 is 130. 2 times 65 is 130. 5 times 26 is 130. And 10 times 13 is 130. Those are the only 8 factors, the only numbers that divide into 130. And you have to pick the right pair, and there'll only be one pair that not only gives you a multiplication of 130, but will also, and I've done this in green, add up to the middle term of -3. So you can see I circled in green the 10 and the 13. But keep in mind, since they multiply to give you a -130, one of these numbers has to be positive and the other has to be negative. So I'm going to make the 10 positive and the 13 negative so that when I multiply them, I get the -30. And when I add them, positive 10 and -13, it gives me the -3. So I found the right pair. And what this AC method does is it actually finds for you what outsides and insides were in the FOIL method when you FOIL these things. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to take out the middle term, the -3w, and I'm going to replace it with a plus 10w minus 13w. So that instead of a quadratic equation with 3 terms in it, I've now got a polynomial equation with 4 terms, so that I can do something called, and I've rewritten this down here in black, factoring by grouping. You're going to put them in groups of 2. So I look at the 2w squared and the 10w, the first 2 terms, and I factor out a greatest common factor there, which is a 2w. When I factor out 2w squared divided by 2w is w. 10w divided by 2w is plus 5. Now I'm done with that part, right? Now I pick up the back 2, a minus 13w and a minus 65. You're going to factor out a minus 13. If this had been a plus 13, I would have factored out a positive 13. But since it's a negative, I'm going to pull out a negative. And when I factor -13 out, I get w plus 5. -13w divided by -13 gives me a positive 1w. -65 divided by -13 gives me a positive 5. And if you've done this correctly, your parentheses should match. So that's why I put them in orange. They do match. They're both w plus 5s. So what you do is you literally factor out the w plus 5. You pull him out, and then the 2w and the minus 13, they basically come together and become their own factor, their own binomial factor. And that's how they got from here to there. You can see they left out quite a bit of steps. And then I just went from there and I solved them. Since they're both supposed to, when you factor it, it's still equal to 0. So take the 2w minus 13, set it equal to 0, and solve it. I added 13 and divided by 2. And then over here, I take the w plus 5 and set it equal to 0 and just subtract the 5. And that's how I got the answers. I hope that helps.